My name is Greg Johnson. I was married for 17 years to a woman who, as I thought, loved me with all her heart, Caroline. So sue me, I am a cuckold. She has been having an affair with her boss for about 6 years now, who owns a real estate firm where she works. We have 3 children, a 16-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy. The third one is a beautiful little girl who just turned 2. I love them all, except for my wife. Oh, yes, before I forget, I'm a police sergeant. About 2 months ago, my youngest daughter fell at daycare, and my wife was unreachable to pick her up. Dad rushes to help. I jumped into my car with flashing lights and raced after her. She was sucking on a lollipop on a stick and sniffling. I approached her, inspected her, kissed her, and tousled her hair. The older ones wouldn't allow it, but she likes it. I left her giggling and went to talk to the principal. She told me that Gidget fell and hurt her leg pretty badly. They called for an ambulance, and it will be here soon. I went and sat with my daughter, and soon she started laughing again. A doctor from the emergency service appeared and said she needed to go to the emergency room to get stitches. So, I escorted the ambulance to the emergency room. I tried to contact my wife, but the communication went to voicemail. I left a message and then launched the locator app because Linny constantly misplaced her smartphone. The phone was smart, not so much with my wife. It showed her at the Holiday Inn hotel, just 7 miles away from here. I sat with my daughter while they stitched her up. When they finished, we signed some forms. I went to the trunk and got out a foldable child seat. I installed it in the back seat and strapped her in with the seatbelts. Then we went to find her mother. My stomach began to reject the lunch I had eaten. I pulled into the parking lot of the Holiday Inn and arrived just in time to see Caroline and Arthur Dash, her boss, exiting the lobby. They stood arm in arm, his left hand resting on her buttocks. They were laughing and smiling, and then she kissed him. You could almost think she was kissing me. It was precisely such a kiss. I parked the big Ford and watched, adjusting the camera to a tight focus as they made their way to her Lincoln Aviator. She turned to him and licked his glands. His hand slipped under her skirt, lifting it enough for me to see the lace tops of her stockings. I had to beg her to wear stockings, and never in public. Then she slid her hand under the hem of her dress and pulled out her sky blue lace panties, which I had given her on our anniversary. She smiled, sniffed them, and handed them to him. Everything's over, I recalled my thoughts. They laughed, kissed again, and then she got into her car and drove off. Suddenly, I saw brake lights, and her car swerved to a stop. Her car was stationary, and suddenly my phone rang. I looked at the number and the name. It was that crap. Hello, Caroline, I answered evenly. What's happened? Where are you? She asked. I'm at the hospital. The baby is fine. Where are you? I couldn't reach your phone. I'm in the office. I'm on my way to the hospital now. Drive carefully, I said, hanging up. I watched her car as she called twice more. I switched them all to voicemail. She started moving forward and nearly collided with a pickup truck when she screamed and ran out onto the street. I sighed and headed home. I grabbed my phone, dialed a friend's number, and told him I needed to talk to him. I pulled up to the house and dragged sleeping Gidget inside. I went back to my car and picked up 4 DNA swab kits. I went in and swabbed Gidget's mouth with a tampon. I placed the tampon in the container, sealed it, and marked the plastic bag. I went for a cup of tea with ice and called work. I spoke to my boss, the head of the detective department, and told him I needed the remainder of the week off to attend to some family matters. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, sir. I just need to see one of the doctors regarding my children. All right, just keep me posted. Got it, Chief. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I felt physically sick when I saw her, but I took a deep breath and counted to 10. I only made it to 7 before she knocked on the door. Where is she? She screamed. I told her to calm down and that she was sleeping. She brushed past me into the baby's bedroom. I started making a list of things to do for tomorrow. Divorce lawyer, DNA test, electronics store. She came out of the bedroom and rushed to me. What happened? She demanded. She fell. Everything's fine with her. She handled it like a champ. Just 4 stitches, and the doctor said they'll hardly leave a scar. She's fine, Caroline. Why didn't they call me? She shouted at me. They tried, dear. They couldn't reach you. I tried too. The message went to voicemail. So where were you, dear? She started stuttering and looked away. I was at a meeting. I turned it off so it wouldn't interrupt the meeting. I suggest instead of turning it off, you put it on vibrate. I'm just glad nothing serious happened with the kids, or maybe something fatal didn't happen to me. Her face clouded, then she paled. I never thought about that, she said. Of course, you didn't, dear, I thought to myself. With these words, 2 more of our children ran in from school. Marissa, who was 16, and Junior, who was 12. They stopped in the living room and looked at their parents. What happened, Dad? My son asked. My lovely daughter shot her mother a cold glance, but she asked me, is everything okay, Dad? She asked. Yes, your sister fell at daycare and got a cut. She had to go to the emergency room to get stitches, and I went with her, I said, watching my wife. She flinched. Where were you, Mom? Marissa asked. I was at a meeting, she mumbled. Obviously, my daughter knew or suspected something. Junior, as we called him, stared at his mother intently. Really, Mom? He said. Caroline hesitated and blushed deeply. I need to take a shower, she said. I couldn't resist. Didn't you take it this morning? I innocently asked. She stumbled and looked at me, trying to provoke a spontaneous outburst from me. Deal with it, Craig, she hissed. She turned and stormed upstairs. I turned to my children and was surprised by their looks. They were devastated and looked sadly at me. Everything will be fine, guys. Just a little disagreement. Whatever you say, Dad, Marissa said. Junior just nodded. How about some pizza? I asked. I called and ordered pizza. 30 minutes later, they brought 2 large pizzas, one with pepperoni, one with mushrooms. The kids hollered, even little Gidget, and we waited for their mom. She showed up and turned up her nose. You know I only like anchovies, she growled. So sue me, I said. She gave me a piercing glare and went to pour herself some wine. The kids chuckled and shot disapproving looks at their mother. She rushed off somewhere, and the kids and I recounted school events and community activities, that is, dates and the like. It was chilly between us that night, and I had to grab another blanket. It had been about 3 months since we were close. It would be even harder. The next day, I met with a lawyer and asked her what my options were. She still couldn't stand cheaters, especially women, and had a soft spot for cops. But she told me we were not at fault, and despite everything, they'd crucify me if my wife didn't agree to everything I wanted. She told me to gather all possible evidence, and we'll see what we'll see. She actually said that from an alimony perspective, I was in decent shape because my wife earned more money than I did. Besides, due to her age, my elder daughter could decide for herself who she wanted to live with. I went to a friend and asked him to set up surveillance on my wife and her friend. He was a good friend, and I had worked with him before. It wouldn't cost too much, and I would have everything I needed. Then I went to an electronics store and bought several wireless voice recorders and 3 video cameras. I went home and installed cameras in the master bedroom, the living room, and the guest room. I would place one of the tape recorders in her car, one on the bookshelf in the living room, and another in the master bedroom. Then I received a message from my wife that she would be home late and that I should watch the kids until she got back. I got ready, went and picked up Gidget, and then went home to prepare dinner. About 2 hours later, my 2 older kids came home, and we discussed dinner. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and creamed spinach. How does that sound? I asked. Marissa said it sounded appetizing. The youngest looked at me, smirked slightly, and asked, what does Mom want? I told him that Mom could cook her own dinner. Marissa and the youngest glanced at each other, and then Marissa said, Dad, we need to talk. I figured I was going to be read the riot law, so we moved to the kitchen and started dinner. She began, Dad, I think Mom's cheating. She doesn't respect you, and she's never around when we need her. Marissa's right, Dad. I was glad they had both looks and brains, wherever they got them from. I stopped what I was doing and gathered them into a group hug. Their youngest sister immediately joined us, shouting, Me too, me too. I looked at my children and told them I loved them more than myself. I always told them that. They always thought it was corny, but they liked it. I told them things didn't look good, and I was keeping an eye on what their mother was up to. But know this. I'll always love you, you're my kids. We'll get through this, I promise. The youngest chirped, I think you should get cheek swabs for us, Dad. It might help your case. It would never change how I feel about you, but it'd be nice to know how rotten she is. The youngest is right, Dad. I want to know because right now, I'm not feeling much love for her. I was stunned, but I felt sorry for them. All right, let's get this done before she gets home, I said. I took cheek swabs, theirs first, then mine. I sealed them up and put them in my briefcase. The next day, I went to an independent lab and asked them to run a DNA express analysis. It cost a little more, but I wanted it done as quickly as possible. 2 weeks later, I got the results. None of the children were mine. Her company always threw a 4th of July party at the owner's house. I really didn't want to go, but I was told I had to. She was one of the top wine salespeople in the company and was expected to be there. I had everything I needed on her and her lover: tapes, photos, audio recordings, videos, receipts, and the DNA test results. I just couldn't think of a better way or time to do it. I realized that no matter what I did or when, I was going to lose. And I went. She said it wasn't going to be a family event, so the kids weren't invited. Looking back, I realized that was a blessing. We arrived just after 11 o'clock in the morning and grabbed a couple of drinks, beer for me, white wine for her. She was dressed in a yellow sundress, no bra, 7-centimeter espadrilles, and a shawl. She looked good. I stayed fairly close to her, not exactly watching her, but still watching. Her friend found her and chatted with her for a bit. He whispered sweet nothings in her ear, then went back to playing the host. He disappeared, and I immediately intensified my surveillance of Carolyn. She kept looking around, and after the 3rd glass, she lost sight of me. She doesn't handle alcohol well and was one gulp away from getting drunk. I watched as she grabbed another glass of wine and slid to the back of the lawn lot his house was built on. 2 of her work friends tried to distract me, but I switched to Coke after half of my bud. They were slightly tipsy, and I managed to keep an eye on her as she headed towards the corner of the garden shed and disappeared behind the back door. I put my Coke on the table, took out my cell phone, and turned on the video camera. I moved towards the corner of the shed, sneaked around it, left the area, and made my way to the gate at the back of the building. I peeked around the corner and saw my wife. Her sundress was pulled up to her waist and her tits were exposed to the sun and the breeze. He had her and she was moaning and groaning the whole time. Her white lace panties were lying on the ground. A light bulb went on in my head and I thanked my lucky stars for this stroke of luck. I turned the camera off and took a few pictures. As soon as I pulled out my phone, I waited for them to climax. Then I reached for his stupid-looking man-ass, grabbed it, and pulled him out of my wife and off of her. I spun him around and punched him in the face with my right hand, shattering his nose and breaking his left cheekbone. I managed to break something in my hand as well. He slumped to the ground unconscious, and Carolyn slid down the shed wall and also sprawled out on the ground. I pulled out my handcuffs and cuffed him to the fence post while reading him his rights. You are under arrest for rape. You have the right to remain silent. If you choose to waive your right to remain silent, anything you say can be used against you in court. Carolyn began to scream. Craig, what are you doing? You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? Carolyn was already hysterical and was struggling to get up. I took out my cell phone, dialed 911, and waited. 911, what's your emergency? This is Detective Craig Johnson, badge number 714. I'm at Larson Street, and I have a suspect in custody for rape. I need backup and a supervisor on the scene as soon as possible and an ambulance. Private residence, party in progress. Carolyn was furious. This isn't what you think. It's not rape, you idiot. Here's how it's going to go, Carolyn. This is rape. I have video, audio, pictures, photographs, tapes, receipts, timelines of where you've been, and the DNA of our 3 children showing that they're not mine. Are you going to agree to this, or will you never even look at your children again, you crap? Blood drained from her face. She collapsed to the ground again and screamed, no. I lifted her up and wrapped her in her shawl. Decide, Carolyn. She muttered, my panties. You didn't need them 5 minutes ago. Why do you think you need them now? Leave them at the crime scene for the guys. I helped her to her feet. She sobbed, breathed heavily, and sniffled. We made our way across the lawn behind the house to the backyard. As we approached, about 10 or so people loitering outside fell silent, more shocked than anything. They moved aside, and I led her to an empty lounge chair and sat her down. 2 of her tipsy friends rushed over to her and started shouting. What happened? What did you do to her? I didn't do anything. Your boss raped her. What? Donna screamed. You heard me, I said. You didn't know? You didn't know. Laura squealed. Know what? I asked. She said she had an open marriage. She said you were fine with it. She lied, I said. Just then, the cops arrived. I directed 2 officers downstairs to the garden shed and instructed them to read him his rights again because I wasn't sure he heard me. A replacement sergeant arrived with another patrol officer, and I ordered the officer to take statements from Donna and Laura and their addresses. The jerk's wife pushed her way through the crowd and wanted to know what was going on. The sergeant explained that her husband had been arrested for rape and someone told her what happened. She exploded. You crap. She lunged forward and tried to attack Caroline, who by this time was almost catatonic. The cops restrained her, and shortly after, paramedics arrived. I told them what had happened, and they put Caroline on a stretcher. When she got up, she left a small puddle on the lounge chair. His juice was running down her leg and she was crying. I told them to take her to a trauma center and get her checked for rape. Then 2 other cops brought Arthur with a swollen face and hands handcuffed behind his back. He made the mistake of saying they had an understanding and the intimacy was consensual. Unfortunately, his wife heard him and lunged at him. You son of a bitch. They restrained her again, and she said, You'll hear from my lawyer. I followed them to the station and signed all the forms because, after all, she was still my wife. I went to the precinct and filed a complaint against him under oath. Since it was Saturday, he couldn't be arraigned until Monday. He tried to reach his lawyer, but his wife had beaten him to it. I returned to the reception area and went to see my soon-to-be ex-wife. She had a rough day and looked terrible. She saw me come in, brightened up, and attempted to smile. Then she saw the expression on my face and became alarmed at my demeanor. So, Carolyn, how long has this been going on? She trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to last long. Just a little fling. I didn't mean for this. Bullshit, Carolyn. I lunged towards her and stopped a few inches from her face. Gidget's not mine, Junior's not mine, and Marissa's not mine. It's been 17 years. We've been married for 17 years. You can do the math yourself, you crap. You're supposed to be one of the top sellers. Why, Carolyn, why? The tears were almost immediately replaced by a smirk as she wiped her eyes. Because I can. You're supposed to be a detective, you figure it out. I can have as many lovers as I want and you have no idea. I looked at my soon-to-be ex-wife, and something inside me died. I stared right through her, and the cold expression on my face said a lot to her. It seemed like she aged centuries before my eyes, shrinking into herself. Oh God, what's wrong with me? I took her hand and led her to our car. I sat her in the passenger seat, got in myself, and drove to her parents' house. She stared blankly out the window until we pulled up to their house and stopped. What are we doing here? I want to go home. People in hell want ice water, crap. I got out, pulled her from the car, and led her to the front door. I rang the bell, and when it opened, there stood her father. Frank, I said, your daughter needs to stay here for a while. I'll come back tomorrow to explain everything. She just got out of the emergency room. Please take care of her. He looked at me as if I had 2 heads. I turned and walked away. I turned off my phone and headed home. I went to my kids, and they looked at me. Where's Mom? She's at your grandparents'. She'll be there for a while. I briefed them on what had happened, sparing the gory details. They accepted it, after tears and sniffles, and said they understood why I did what I did, but they couldn't understand why she did what she did. Welcome to the club, I thought. I went and gathered reports, tapes, photos, surveillance reports, and receipts of everything I had on her. I prepared 4 packages in total, leaving out only the DNA test results. I called the lawyer and pulled the divorce trigger. I requested a restraining order based on the police report and the rape case materials. I enclosed the DNA results in a packet for the lawyers, then went to the asshole's house and talked to his wife, Lorna. I apologized for the disturbance, and she kindly sympathized with me about the overall mess. I handed her the packet I had and told her to use whatever she wanted. She was a little taken aback and thanked me. I left and went home. I stopped by her parents' house and gave one of the packages to my future ex-father-in-law. Your daughter is messed up. You need to get her some help. I turned and left. I went home. The next day, we went to church and then to Denny's for breakfast. I kept my phone off the entire day and night. On Monday morning, I showed up at work and got the time for the asshole's arraignment. I appeared at the courthouse and witnessed the arraignment. His lawyer played the consensual sex card and claimed there was no rape. They presented statements from 2 women from the company. The judge wasn't sure she liked what she heard but said she was dismissing the charges with prejudice, meaning he could face new charges if anything changed. He turned, saw me, and smirked. That didn't last long, as whoever was his wife's advance man arranged for him to be served divorce papers on his way out of the courthouse, along with the restraining order. I smirked as I left. Not quite even yet. I came home with copies of the rape report, the police report, and the DNA results from the rape scene. Guess who the biological father of my poor little daughter was? I was on the phone with my lawyer when someone knocked on my front door. Now, there's only one person I know who knocks instead of ringing the bell. Of course, I opened the door to my current brother-in-law. Anthony was Carolyn's older brother, but only by about 3 years. He had his own construction company. There were rumors he had ties to the mafia. A few years back, his son got into some trouble with drugs, and I pulled a few strings, 99% legal, and sorted it out. Then we got him into a program, got him straightened out, and now he's in his 3rd year at seminary doing well. Needless to say, I was his favorite brother-in-law. So, this was probably not a social call. Tony squeezed past me, greeted by my kids. They loved him, his wife Teresa, and their 3 kids. He broke free from their embrace, turned to me, and said, "Back porch." We walked to the back porch, and he turned to me and said, "What the hell is going on? Carolyn is feeling unwell at her parents' house, and Dad is furious. Did she tell you anything? You kicked her out." Then she got evasive and didn't want to talk anymore. It was right after Dad showed her the literature you gave him. What's going on? Did you look into any of the things your dad had? He wouldn't let me. Sigh. Your sister has been cheating on me for 17 years. None of my kids are biologically mine. She spread her charms everywhere. I don't know who Marissa's or Junior's father is. She probably doesn't either. Gidget's father is her current boss, Arthur Dash. She also has a sexually transmitted disease, gonorrhea, and she's pregnant. Not by me. Your dad has everything I have except for the rape evidence in the police report, but my lawyer has it all. She'll be served divorce papers this week. He slumped into a chair and looked at me despondently. No chance? Of what? And would you have done it? No, I understand. They dropped the charges against the shithead. That's what I call him, and his wife left him, who also has everything your dad has, thanks to me. I didn't want to be harsh to your parents, Tony, but with the attitude your sister has now, I didn't want them to get the wrong information. And she needs serious psychological help. I understand. Just a little shocking, that's all. Tell me about it. We talked a bit, and he got up to leave. So what are you going to do about the shithead? He asked. I don't know. Whatever I do, it'll come back to bite me. I know what I want to do, but, no offense, she's not worth going to jail over. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You're still family. It won't come back to haunt you. I won't harm my sister, but he'll get his. That'll even the score, brother." "Tony, don't do this," I said. "Do what?" he asked. He turned and left before I could say anything else. So, on Thursday, my wife was served divorce papers at her parents' house. She passed out, and they had to take her to the emergency room. She stayed in the hospital for about a week. Then she came back home, to her parents' house. Her father came to talk to me. "Couldn't we fix this somehow anyway?" he asked. "Haven't you seen what I've given you?" "Yes, but obviously, she made a mistake." "A mistake?" I shouted. Scratching a car was a mistake. Forgetting to pay a bill was a mistake. Sleeping with someone else for 17 years, getting pregnant by another man, passing him off as your husband's child, stopping having sex with him wasn't a mistake. I'm just glad the kids were at day camp when I laid into their grandfather. I calmed down and told him to get her to sign the papers. I'm done with her. He wasn't happy with either of us. Tough shit. An interesting thing happened. She was notified about 3.5 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago the asshole disappeared. He didn't show up for a meeting with his lawyer and his wife. Turns out, for tax purposes, she was the majority owner of Dash Realty. So, she really wasn't concerned and amended her suit to show she was the one leaving him. The divorce process is still ongoing, but now it's going to take a year. Caroline was 2 months pregnant, so we had to wait another 7 months to finalize everything. So, we waited. As the case dragged on, her lawyer tried to push for changes to the settlement. She wanted more, claimed she was entitled to more. I proposed letting her keep the house and paying her a 10% settlement. She was to retain her retirement savings in our savings account. No visitations, except for one weekend every 2 months at her parents' place. No male or female companions present, let alone Marissa. She didn't want to see her. Her lawyer was against almost everything. I asked my lawyer to set up a meeting. I arrived at my lawyer's office half an hour early and loaded a DVD into his projector. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down. She walked in with her lawyer. My lawyer introduced himself, and Caroline extended her hand to him. I know who you are. I don't need to meet you. Her lawyer said we should behave civilized and nailed a glance from my best cop. He choked slightly. They began to negotiate. After 4 hours, they had gone through everything but reached no agreement. I vetoed everything and even withdrew a few items. Then she exploded, saying I was being unreasonable. I dropped a hydrogen bomb. Okay. You answer one question truthfully, and I'll reconsider. I pressed the play button on the DVD player. The disc started with Caroline and the jerk exiting the Holiday Inn. It was footage from the dashcam of my police car. She had never seen it, never even suspected its existence. It continued until she pulled out the blue lace panties. I stopped it and turned to her. Her face was ashen, and her jaw dropped to the table. At the meeting, Caroline? Tell me, where are the anniversary panties, my loving wife? Where the hell are they? If you don't sign this as it is, we'll go to court, and everything will become public knowledge. Sign it. She cried, grabbed the pen, and signed everything. Her lawyer was stunned as she grabbed her purse, stood up, and her water broke. She screamed. We called an ambulance and took her to the hospital. I made sure my name wasn't listed as the father on the birth certificate. She gave birth to a boy weighing 3 kilograms. My lawyer filed for DNA testing, and voila, he wasn't my child. Furthermore, he wasn't the jerk's child either. She had also cheated on her lover. The divorce went through, and I was finally free. I immediately became very popular on the singles market. My daughter told me I was considered a hunk. My son warned me to be careful, otherwise you might get attacked. I went to visit my brother-in-law, and we shared a couple of beers. Finally, I asked him if he knew what happened to the jerk. Who's that? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Don't worry about it, I said. I went on some dates, but my heart wasn't in it. About 2 years later, Tony and Teresa threw a party at a bar. Everyone was invited, including my ex-wife. The kids stayed away from her and the guy she brought along. However, her little boy was charming. My daughters literally flocked to him. My now 18-year-old daughter brought a young man to the party. He seemed okay, but he was still being vetted. Actually, I liked him, but don't tell her that. The guy who came with her mother was eyeing my daughter. I saw it but didn't want to embarrass my daughter with any actions or words. He continued to loom over her and I was about to intervene when her young man friend joined her. Hey, honey, what's going on? He said. Stay out of this, kid. The young lady and I are having a conversation. Oh, don't mind me, he said. I was just trying to keep her from causing you any pain. His hand slid to her thigh, then to her buttock. Get your hands off me, she said, looking him straight in the eye. Hey, you know you like it, don't pretend. She punched him in the throat and grabbed his right hand. His thumb snapped back, cracking, and his scream caught everyone's attention. I don't have my mother's morals, scumbag. Her friend smirked. That's my girl, I thought. Her mother came over, squealing, what have you done? My brother-in-law, who had seen and heard everything, approached and said, I think both of you should leave. After they left the party, everything quieted down. Then someone new arrived. My sister-in-law rushed over and hugged the striking brunette, about 170 centimeters tall, with a petite chest and legs from hips to ankles. She had the cute face of a neighborhood girl, and her eyes were brown with golden flecks. She was stunning. At least, I thought so. My son came over and nudged me in the ribs. Keep your eyes in your head, old man, he grinned. What are you talking about? I asked. Then my sister-in-law brought the lovely lady over to us and introduced her. Kurt, this is my sister, Angelina O'Malley. Oh, damn. All the good ones are taken, I thought. She just moved here. She has a 10-year-old son, she was a lawyer, and she wanted to start over. Her husband was killed in Afghanistan. Teresa looked me in the eyes and said, I told her all about you. Maybe you can help each other. Angie looked at me and said, we can give it a try.
Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. And we'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel.